To order then. All right, and welcome everybody. So item A, Zoom meeting information, check. We'll move on to item B, the roll call. I am here, Vice Chair Ned.
Present.
And I'd like to welcome our new Alder Stoyer.
I am here.
All right, and John.
Present.
Stephanie Dodge. Don't see her.
She said she was coming earlier this week. We talked about it, so hopefully she comes.
Yeah. And Amy Cox. And Corey Mim.
Present.
And Julia Nordyke.
Present.
And Mark Walter.
Present.
All right. On to approval of the agenda for today's meeting, April 20th. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
By John. Is there a second? By
I'll
Mark.
second. Yeah.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All
Who
those-
made the second on the
It
motion?
was Mark Walter was the second.
Okay.
Just we can go by Stoyer and Walter if you want.
I'll call you M Dubs.
There's a lot of stories there.
Cool. All right. So all those in favor, and then nobody opposed. So that passes. Approval of the minutes from our last meeting on March 15th. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
By Amy. Is there a second? By John with the hand. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. Then the minutes from last time are approved. So on to regular business. So item 1 here is a permeable pavement pilot project grant award. And before we get into discussion, we actually did have a request from the community. From Susan. It looks like you're on to speak in favor of this item. So I'd like to entertain a motion to open the floor to let the public speak to this item.
So moved.
By Ned, is there a second?
Second.
By Walter. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. All right, and the floor is open. Sue, if we've got you, the floor is all yours. Just state your names for us, please.
Hi, sorry, I can't get my video working. Yeah, my name is Susan Vandehei. I'm at 1282 Ridgedale Court. I didn't necessarily want to talk about this permeable pavement. I'm here to just talk about my support for your mission. I had reached out to Melissa early asking how I could help to help with the Sustainability Commission. I thought you had a great presentation last night. I'll give you a little background on myself. I have a native plant garden. I have a rain garden. I worked with Justin Craning about 6 years ago. I was part of the food compost program with Mark Walter, and I'm now set up for the No Mow May. So I love what you guys are doing. I'd like to see Green Bay become more progressive, and I want to help with that. So what started this was watching some of the council meetings and some of the resistance that I've noticed. I just felt that we need something different going on in the community. And if there was any way that I could help, I'd be more than willing to do that. I had heard that with green infrastructure, sometimes the cost benefit isn't there. I heard that the numbers such as it's 40 to 80 to 100% more. And I guess I just wish there was an easier way to express to some of these people that, to me, it's no different than like the Focus on Energy program where you had to pay up front and they would tell you what you needed to do in your home. And so you'd have to spend the money but in the long run, it saved you money. Or another example would be LED bulbs. So I guess I do have a question. I heard that because we have clay, that there is no benefit with green infrastructure as far as flooding, that it only helps with pollution going into our streams. So I guess I would need a little clarification on that. But otherwise, I'm just looking forward to helping in whatever way I can. And Melissa did suggest that I get more community involved, and I'm still working on that. So that'll be my mission in the near future. So with that, I'll just, unless there's any questions, I guess, I don't know.
I guess I'd like to ask a question for Susan.
Sure.
You mentioned the native planting and working with Justin and the NOMO May. If you are looking to get involved, we do have a working group called the Pollinator Corridor. And if that's something that you'd be interested in, you can get a hold of me. We are looking for some more citizen involvement and leadership in that area. So if that's a passion of yours, I would definitely welcome you to join up with that project. And as far as the GI and does it show benefits for clay, I do remember Director Grenier talking about that at the meeting. And I think, you know, as we look further and deeper into the GI, we really want to be able to provide council with an answer for that question. I'm not sure if anyone present has an answer for that question right now, but that is certainly something that we need to be cognizant of, along with the long-term costs and benefits. So those are all really, really good, important issues. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, Julia.
Susan, thanks so much for coming and supporting the work that we're doing. That's great to hear. I can respond a little bit to your green infrastructure comment / question. So I would say, so from my perspective, we're really at the beginning of the conversation with the city and within this group, and then the city in general, when it comes to engineering and where to place things properly. So the last couple of years, a lot of the focus on green infrastructure has been about looking at codes and ordinances of the city and removing barriers so that we can encourage and promote the installation of them just in general. So now we're moving into like, where should we put these kind of practices? And there's a lot of, I don't think I've seen like a really good talk or discussion about just green infrastructure and some just like baseline education around it in general. And we have a traffic engineer, so they can definitely speak to this work too. But one of the best things about green, it's definitely not going to solve flooding. And so we will not be like the whole flooding problem. Green infrastructure can be very complementary to our gray infrastructure systems and taking a lot of stress off those in general. And then also they're very different than our large stormwater systems that we're used to. And they need to be strategic. We have to do modeling and really look strategically at where we place them. There's many communities that, you know, have clay soils too, and using them successfully to manage stormwater in general. So yes, they have a big water quality benefit, but we can slow down water and potentially do storage with them too, if they're strategically placed in certain maybe sewer sheds or areas. But it's very site specific, and that will take a lot more analysis and like in-depth look and modeling at certain areas of the city to see where it's complementary. So it's definitely a tool in the flooding toolbox, but it's not by any means the number one solution in general for flooding. It can help. It helped just like at my house. I had flooding when I bought my house. So just in my yard, and I put in a rain garden and it resolved that. So it's, I mean, on a very small scale, it can help you just in your own yards. And like we had a lot of water coming down from our driveway and we put in a rain garden instead of diverting it through a pipe somewhere. It has to just be, it's totally site specific, and we really have to take a deeper dive into that. And I think that's some of the goals of developing a green infrastructure plan.
Thank you, Julia.
And one last thing for clay soils, like the city of Superior, very flat, like us, under drains on these practices. So there's different things that practices that have been successful other places too. So, but it's
That's
just
great.
more about, it's just more about like where you put it and what you're putting in. So.
Good. Because I heard that, well, there were some terms like fancy streets and pie in the sky, making it sound that it was very, well, of course, no guarantee, but just that it was too risky for us to even get involved in that type of thinking. I guess that's what I heard. So I just.
Yeah, that reminds me of your first comment, actually. So again, I would just emphasize that we're really at the beginning of the conversation, and green infrastructure can be very hard to do a cost benefit analysis because it is so site specific. It depends on material. It depends on your local resources in general, like workforce and things like that. And some of the best things we can do is do demonstrations. So, and engineering actually learn what is the most efficient ways to do these practices here and make them more cost effective. And also it's very hard to quantify also because it's very hard to calculate a lot of the benefits. So thinking about aesthetics or, green space for our neighborhoods and quality of life and quality improvements, or reducing heat in our communities by not having so much pavement. So those are harder things to quantify in the cost benefit analysis, but I think we're just getting going on this, and those are the types of things we'll be really looking into.
Thank you, Julie. Sounds great.
But I have a question, Chair.
Go ahead.
Well, actually, is the floor still open? I was going to ask Julia.
Yeah, I guess the floor is still open on this. I think we're going to have a discussion about the grant after the floor is open. So why don't we?
Okay. Maybe I'll wait for that. Does that have to do with Eliza?
Yeah, I think that's the.
Okay. I can wait. I can wait on that.
Thanks, Alder. Any other questions for Susan? Well, I just want to thank you, Susan, for to our meeting and for voicing your support. If Melissa has your contact information, we can be sure to stay in touch about all sorts of opportunities that we have to do some of this really important work. So again, thanks for joining us tonight. While the floor still is open, Sister Sally Ann, if y'all have anything to say, the floor is open. If not, we can have a motion to close the floor.
Thank you, Seth.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you for the wonderful presentation. I missed the council meeting last night, the Common Council. However, this morning I took the time to really listen to your presentation and the wonderful support that was offered for the work of the Sustainability Commission, and applaud your efforts and think your work plan for 2022 is wonderful. So we're very appreciative of it as the Sisters of St. Francis. Thank you.
Excellent. And thanks for being some of our strongest supporters and best attendees to our meetings. It's always great to have you here.
Thank you.
And I'll just point out, they actually have bioretention on their property that are quite beautiful and lovely. And they do like mostly native plantings throughout their whole property and then just mow trails through them. So they are very good models. I have very nice pictures that I'll be using in the future as examples.
Thank you, Julia.
All right, if there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to close the floor again
So moved.
by Ned. Is there a second?
Second.
By Mark Walter. All those in favor of closing the floor, say aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay. All right, the floor is closed. We'll move onto this item then, and I think that will be you, Melissa, to cue us up.
So I sent everything out, an attachment in the packet with your agenda regarding the grant that I'm about to discuss. If everyone has had a chance to review that, that would be good. Otherwise, I think you can probably look at it on your computer as we go along. Back in February, the Public Works Department applied for an $85,000 grant from the Fund for Lake Michigan to do a demonstration project, a green infrastructure demonstration project. And we chose Eliza Street as the location. It's a small section of Eliza Street in the 400 block, very, very close to the Fox River Trail and to the Fox River to demonstrate it. It's very close to the schools, to a couple of different schools. And we were awarded. We just found out a few days ago that they would like to give us the grant. And so the next process is talking about, we go through a grant acceptance. We have a grant acceptance policy within the city of Green Bay. So it would go to sustainability. And then if you recommend it, it would go to the INS committee to approve accepting the grant award. We would be starting this in probably June. This is part of a regular road reconstruction project, which is part of the reason why we selected the street. That's part of the overall strategy that Public Works is putting together. That's the department I work in, as far as being cost effective by looking at the streets that are up for road reconstruction first for green infrastructure. And what this grant will help us do, besides having a nice demonstration project, is it's going to be a learning opportunity for public work engineers with green infrastructure design, project management regarding, we already have great project managers, but as far as incorporating green infrastructure into the overall evaluation of street projects. So that's one benefit. The other benefit are water quality and water quantity runoff reductions. And those numbers were also put in the packet. We did some preliminary modeling of the project, and that's how we came up with the numbers that we provided you in the packet. So that's a win as well. And it will also be a really good model for what we could do with some of our streets. Primarily with this project, it's going to be permeable pavers. So if you can sort of imagine, when someone puts in like a permeable paver driveway or a paver patio, it will be aesthetically pleasing. It's going to be in the main width of the road. And I've spoken with the neighbors that are adjacent, the property owners adjacent to where this is going in, and they were very supportive of the project. So that's sort of in a nutshell what this is about. We would be wrapping it up by the end of the year with the conclusion of the construction season. And yeah, so that's really, I guess, in a summary, what the grant is all about. And we're going to have some good education opportunities with the Elda Leopold School on this as well, and really any school that that is interested. Part of the matching funds, it's only a $5,000 match, and it's coming from our stormwater utility to install signage near the Fox River Trail and where the street meets with the Fox River Trail. And then we can also use some of that money to do targeted outreach as well. And the neighborhood association is also supportive of it. We received letters of support from the Astor Neighborhood Association, the Green Bay Public Schools, the DNR, and I know I'm forgetting someone. Sea Grant. Sea Grant, sorry, Julia. So I would be looking for a motion to, I think I wrote it in there, but a motion to recommend accepting the grant and then referring it to the INS committee for grant acceptance.
So moved.
We have a motion by Ned. Is there a second by John? All right, and did we have some discussion? Alder Stoyer, I think you had a few questions.
Well, yes, first of all, it's good to be with you folks. I've been to a couple of the meetings in the past, and I've had a chance to meet with Seth, and I know Mark and a few of you folks. So, I think there's some interesting things. And like was brought up, I mean, I know you folks have done a lot of work on this over time, but again, being on council, the bottom line always is cost. And I know with the GI, for example, a little tougher to put a handle on that. So I like what Melissa brought up, that looking at these projects moving forward, I'm going to actually be on the INS committee as well. So joy. But anyway, looking at what roads need to be done, like I can see where the opportunities would come up to do this type of work when a road isn't paved or reconstructed. So I think that's a big thing. So we can look at that. I'm in the process of looking at all the roads in our city as far as what really needs to be done. What the program is for that. So I think that might be able to piggyback along with that. So I think that's important. And I guess if nothing else, I think the fact that we're doing a small portion here, or that's the anticipation that once that is done, then we'll have something that we can look at, for other projects. So I think that's important. So we need to get something finished down the road and look at the results and what the good things may come from that. Comment initially.
One of the other things I wanted to mention is one of the outcomes of this grant will be a written outline or process for public works staff in evaluating GI in right-of-way projects. So that will be something that and quite honestly, we've already started those discussions. This isn't just completely from scratch, because we were looking at other street projects earlier in the year, before some of those other meetings occurred. So we really want to be able to, once we have a demonstration project, be able to replicate this, because with permeable pavers, they're actually there's other cities that have used that a lot in their alleyways when they're doing alleyway reconstruction. For example, like Wauwatosa, they've already converted 23 to 25 of all of their alleys into permeable pavement alleyways. So this is something that's being done in other parts of Wisconsin and in northern climates. It works in northern climates as well.
Okay. I was going to ask, with all the ARPA funds that are out there, has there been talk of that at all? I may have missed some of that. I don't know if the commission has talked about possibly looking at some of the funds for some of the projects as well through the ARPA funds.
Well, that was actually one of the original proposals, Alder Stoyer, was to use ARPA funding for green infrastructure on 2 other road reconstruction projects, and that was denied.
Right. I remember. Yeah, I do remember that. I think there was just like anything else, and I don't know how the other alders feel, but I think a lot of times we just want to have information. We want to have good research done before we make a vote. So I think that's part of it, and it's not for lack of effort on your part at all, but I just think that some of the folks were just a little surprised by it, and I think they were just a little ignorant to what it was. And no fault of anybody, it's just the way the situation came up. But I think moving forward, I think there's some possibilities.
Thanks, Alder Stoyer. Ned? You're muted.
Thank you. I'm trying to get my buttons in the right order here. Melissa, I was just going to ask, as far as the linear, the length of this project, is it just that tiny little piece between Madison and the trail, or is it going to go all the way up to Monroe?
No, it's going to go from the intersection of Madison and Eliza to where it meets the trail. So it's
Okay.
approximately 60 feet long by
Sure.
the width of the road, which is approximately 30 feet.
Okay, just getting that cleared up. Do we have, just out of curiosity, a timeline if this is approved by INS and council?
We don't have a definitive timeline yet because the whole project would still need to go out to bid. And we've been waiting to find out if we get the grant, and the grant has to be accepted by committee and council. So it didn't make sense to do all of those things if for some reason it wasn't approved.
Sure. I appreciate the
But
information.
it's slated for the regular road reconstruction season. So, I think May to late October, early November timeframe.
Okay, of 2023.
No, this year, this
Of
summer.
this year.
Mhm.
Oh, great. Just looking forward to taking my students down there. And I'm good friends with the neighbors, so I'm sure they're excited to see that go into.
They are. They're very supportive of. They see how the especially with the thaw and the freeze cycles that we experienced this season, especially, just with being able to have more infiltration in that area, I think that will help alleviate some of those refreezing problems that happen. I mean, they watch people go down to that dead end and then they can't even get back up the hill.
Yeah. This will be cool. It'll be a cool project. So Mark, I don't know if Alder Story is suggesting maybe we look again at ARPA funds, but if there's something that council would like to see regarding ARPA and green infrastructure, we're glad
Alright.
we're glad you're here, Mark, and that you're on INS as well. So that'd be good route for those conversations.
Well, we'll check the possibilities.
Thank you.
Julia?
I guess the only thing I would add, and I've been trying to kind of say this, I think whether it's INS or just the council in general, would be good to have a very short 10-minute primer about what green infrastructure is. And then even walking, last time I did this was like 3 years ago, and it was focused on the codes part, but rather than just give a primer view and then actually focus more on costs and why things are different than traditional gray infrastructure stuff too, just as like a baseline understanding before we get more complicated. So I don't know if that's agreed. Like, I don't know how that happens, Last time we had a grant, so and I was on that, and I said I would go present, and I'm happy to do that again if that's something, Alderman Stoyer.
Well, that's definitely a possibility. I'd also like to see, there might be some council members that would like to come down and actually see it firsthand. It might be a little unusual, but a lot of times we check projects, we go look at things ourselves. So if there's a way that we could, get small groups of council members to go down and take a look at that, I think that could be beneficial.
I think that's an excellent idea. We did a tour a few years ago for green infrastructure for elected officials. And so there's places already around here that folks can go see them too. I was just thinking more of like that, primer, just even before you start making decisions and start having conversations about it again. Well,
I agree to that, Julia, and I think even the meeting yesterday at council, when you folks came in and presented, it was a good addition to our new council, so that people will remember that. So I think that was important, and I think the big thing is you got to understand, like anything else, the council has a number of different political bents, different styles, and I think if you just stay true to your mission and not try to get too wound up that way, because I can see some people getting wound up politically about some things, and whether it's warranted or not, I think just staying with what the issue is and just looking at it strictly from a nonpartisan standpoint, I think that would go a long way.
Melissa?
So what I wanted to say was, in regards to a GI tour, I had a conversation with Alder Johnson yesterday about this because it's in his district. And I had recommended at some point a green infrastructure tour for the elected officials, not only to see this area, this particular area, but then to go around to look at other different types of green infrastructure that we have in our community, whether it's on private or other public areas where we've implemented green infrastructure, like, the parking lot at Bay Beach is a good example. And he thought that was an excellent idea as well, Alder Stoyer. So I think
I agree.
I will probably be coordinating that at some point and identifying different sites and enlisting the help of Sustainability Commission members also in that regard. I think, and then, inviting the council and doing a little bit more education, I think will go a long way.
And if you keep flexible on that, Melissa, where you look at, there's a number of us that are retired per se, of the council, but some of the folks are working. So maybe there could be one or two during the day where most of the folks can make it, but you'll then have one after work.
Mm-hmm.
So just an idea.
All right, any other discussion on the motion, which is to recommend and then send to INS?
Yes, that is the motion.
Hearing none, we'll then go on to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
I have an
Aye.
Ned is initiating it. Who seconded the motion?
Is that John?
Okay.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay. All right, on to INS. And Melissa, do you have the date for that next INS meeting?
That will be April 27th.
Okay.
I think that I want to say 5:30, but
It immediately follows the parks, so
Right.
it could be 6. It really kind of depends on what the Parks Committee has on their agenda.
right.
Cool. All right, excellent. And then we're gonna now move on to discussion with possible action to recommend staff to create an outdoor lighting ordinance that reduces lateral and vertical light pollution in Green Bay with the goal of creating a darker night sky. Now, Melissa, do you want to speak to that, or is that going to be you, Ned?
I think Ned is introducing that.
All right, Ned, it's all you.
All right, thank you. So as I spoke a little bit last night at council, this was part of a way to look at safe wildlife corridors through the city of Green Bay. One way to do that is to reduce light pollution at night for migrating bird species and also certain migrating insects that navigate at night. So other cities and villages around Wisconsin have instituted what's commonly called like a dark sky ordinance. Most cities have some kind of outdoor lighting requirements already, but these cities have gone a little further as far as really reducing nuisance light when it's lateral and going into other people's windows and such, but also reducing the vertical light that goes above the source of the light, and really trying to direct that light downward where it's doing the most benefit and creating the most, really being used for safety on the streets and sidewalks. So What I did was I looked through several ordinances from around the state. They are attached to our packet today. There's a lot of really interesting technical language in there. And I know that, we have lighting requirements on the books, so it might be just fine tuning some things. But what a lot of cities have done is they've started with creating a requirement for adding like a collar around some of the street lights so that that light is all going downward. And then they've started with the public lights, and which is where I think we should start as a city is really addressing municipal lighting, and then also built-in requirements for private lighting as well. So I'll certainly go to INS and speak to this, but I think we should start municipally and then expand outward into private requirements. We build in a pretty significant timeline to do that. Those are my thoughts on a dark sky ordinance. And I know we have some folks from DPW here. I know Mark has some experience in this realm in the past, so I will turn it over to anyone else who would like to speak to this.
Thank you, Ned. All right, Mark.
Yeah, and then as Ned referenced, I mean, over my career, I've actually written a couple of dark sky ordinances for a couple of communities in Door County, and really the goal is to couple of goals there. Ned mentioned, the having a collar around lights, so you're cutting back on the light scatter. So again, there's nuisance issues, there's habitat or wildlife issues. There's also the type of lighting that's out there. I mean, anybody who's had a neighbor who's had a mercury vapor light hanging over the garage in an urban area realizes really rapidly that's overkill. There's really no reason to have that kind of lighting in an urban neighborhood when you're close up with your neighbors. And there, I think two things here, Ned, as Ned discussed, we have a dark sky ordinance that would really cover everybody, but then the municipal lighting would be part of, I guess, the public works work plan itself, and making sure that whatever the city installs going forward would be consistent with both the ordinance and a work plan potentially coming out of Sustainability Commission itself on dark skies and how lighting is affecting neighborhoods and so forth. So I think it's a great idea. I do remember just changes in lighting in the city of Green Bay from when my kids were born 20, 30 years ago, and being able to see northern lights actually from my backyard, and no longer being able to see that because, well, part of this urban area has grown so much, but also there's a lot more light out there. And I think something like this would certainly help in the long run. Some of it is also just a change in technology with LED lighting out there. I think that in some ways also just by default helps a lot, because LED lighting could be a lot more directed than a lot of the older lighting technologies that were out there. So, but I think this is a great idea to go forward with it.
All right, other thoughts on this? Dave, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I wasn't sure if you had to suspend rules or anything like that to talk like other committees or commissions, but thank you for letting me in on the meeting. I did get the opportunity to talk with Melissa a little bit about the proposal, and thank you, Ned, for the multiple documents that you were able to find. It was very helpful actually to review them and to find out what other communities and agencies, how they approach dark skies when it comes down to private versus public lighting. That's really probably the biggest distinction, at least from my perspective as representative of Public Works and traffic safety. Overall, I really do see this as a positive. You'd think that a lot of our focus would just be on the streets in and of itself, but I can tell you that There are many times where I see light pollution laterally from private developments, maybe a business or whatnot, and it just seems overly bright. We're getting disability glare into the street, which in my opinion actually affects the roadway traffic and public traffic. And yeah, I mean, there's times where I've actually had to get our inspectors involved to correct some of these situations. So an ordinance like this, at least from what I can see at the early onset here, would actually be somewhat beneficial, at least even in my realm of reviewing any sort of light pollution into the street. And I think it actually could make things safer for actually just our overall baseline traffic. The other thing that I noticed in a lot of these ordinances, Madison, Appleton, et cetera, is that they do exempt what they would consider street lighting or outdoor public lighting from it, simply for the fact of that we're in the business of safety. And all the standards that we go by the Illuminating Engineering Society, or IES standards. I've been trained in that many, many years ago. And I can tell you, since we've been pretty much 100% LED now with our lighting, at least anything new that we've been putting out since about 2014, everything that we use is a cutoff fixture. So there is really no lateral light pollution. And even some of the decorative lighting, that's where I think it can, potentially some of these conversations could come up. I can tell you that in any of the pedestrian lighting, low level lighting that I've been involved with when it comes down to installing new or coming up with the designs, I also look for downward firing only. And one of the things too is on some of these fixtures, they may have glass, and the glass actually acts as a refractor. And then that light will actually scatter again, potentially into road users' eyes and create what we call disability glare. So you could even go look on Monroe Avenue, for example. That was the one where I actually had quite the engineering challenge, but we ended up being successful and getting those disability glare numbers that we calculate, we got them way down. So you'll see a glassless fixture. And really what we do with the design is it's more, we point the LED, or I mean the manufacturer does, but that's how we basically get the light distribution that we're looking for and the uniformity that we're looking for. So we've been incorporating this for a good 8 years, really. So I think really what we're doing, even though I would highly recommend that the street lighting would be exempt from these ordinances for dark sky, I can assure you that at least with what we've been doing for street lighting design, it's my opinion that they're dark sky compliant anyway. And we would just continue to move forward that way as long as I'm traffic engineer, at least. Yeah, I think that's really about all I have to say on this. And I think overall I've seen a lot of positives. So.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah, Ned, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you so much, Dave. I really appreciate you coming here and being. I was wondering what your angle was going to be with traffic, so I really appreciate that insight. And I think the way that you've been managing the streetlights, if there would be a way for us to build that into an ordinance, and if the collar or whatever you're adding, whatever you're requiring streetlights now, if that's cutting out the real and certainly the vertical spread of light, it doesn't, our ordinance doesn't necessarily have to match Madison or other cities, but if you have some best practices already, I guess I would hope we could build that into a Green Bay ordinance. That would be, I think, a good way to go with streetlight questions.
Yeah, I would agree. We're actually in the process of coming up with, I guess you would call this kind of standard operating procedures in the various sections of our department. which eventually will lead to an accreditation process through APWA, American Public Works Association. And as part of that process, I'll be obviously tasked to look over the street lighting, traffic signals, anything that's traffic engineering related. And that is my plan, at least when I come up with it, because in essence, we're just summarizing what we're doing, creating a work plan so that once folks like myself and others in this department move on or retire, at least there's a good roadmap for everyone else. And I'm not exactly sure how or if that's going to be adopted by ordinance. I would think that probably parts of it would be at minimum. But that being said, I can assure you that when it comes down to this policy that I'll be drafting, that will be, incorporated into this final document. In essence, I would be recommending IESNA, or Illumination Engineering Society of North America, any of the practices that are part of what they call RP8, or Recommended Practice 8, for street lighting design.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead, Alder.
Okay, thank you, Seth. Both for Dave and maybe Ned as well. And I know, Dave, you work, with the roads, streets, et cetera, but one of the issues that I've had happen in my district is where you have residential homes kind of butting up to commercial or industrial usage. And a lot of times the lighting that is at some of these places, some of these larger factories, really impede things. And I have calls, and we had one situation at an industrial park in my area where we finally get the companies that kind of turn the lights down, or put some kind of, what do you call it, a cuff or whatever you want to call it. But but there was a lot of complaining. But I'm just saying, if there was an ordinance in place, maybe with construction, maybe there's something that could be done where the lighting that is put into these buildings would incorporate that seamlessly. So just an idea.
I do think some of those cities do address some of those concerns in their ordinances. And I was also curious, and I think we'll probably get some folks with more, obviously, engineering background at INS, but to talk about Lambeau Field and that whole area, and how do you account for sports stadiums and things like that? I thought that'd be a curious question to ask.
That would be.
Yeah, I can tell you from living, 6 blocks north of Lambeau, actually the Lambeau Field isn't too bad. It's actually, it's because it's intermittent, but the Titletown district, which has long, tall pole lighting, definitely has an impact on the neighborhood. I've heard from a couple of my neighbors who are closer that their night sky is much brighter than it ever has been in the past, and that's bleed over. But yeah, and that's not really City of Green Bay, so.
Mhm.
Other thoughts, questions, or comments on this? Or any motions that folks would want to make on this?
I would recommend that staff develop a dark sky ordinance as noted in the agenda.
I would second.
All right, we have a motion by Mark and a second by Julia.
Mark Walter.
Mark Walter, any discussion on that before a vote?
I just want to get the motion correctly noted. Recommend staff to develop a dark sky ordinance. Is that correct?
I'll take the motion from the agenda to create an outdoor lighting ordinance that reduces lateral and vertical light pollution in Green Bay with the goal of creating a darker night sky.
right, then if we're ready, we can go to a vote.
Okay. Who initiated that?
Sure, Mark and Julia.
Okay.
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed?
Aye.
All right. The ayes have it. All right, on to staff. Thanks, everybody. And thanks, Dave, for joining us and for talking with us a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity, and we'll see where everything goes from here. Awesome.
Excellent. All right, now then, on to informational updates. Melissa, I'll let you speak to the OEI grant.
Okay, I have some very good news. So the grant that the city of Green Bay and the Green Bay Water Utility and Green Bay Metro Transit applied for a community-wide comprehensive energy planning grant we were selected. And yes, very, very excited. And those were just announced last Friday. And so it'll be a little while before we can get started on it with the consultant, with Slipstream, who's our consultant partner on the project. But yeah, I just wanted to share the good news on that. It's an $87,000 grant from the Office of Energy Innovation, which is part of the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin. And then our match, it's city, water utility, and Metro combined match is $56,000. And that's a combination of cash and in-kind time for the match. So a total of $143,000 to make that project happen. And it will be carried out over the next 12 to 13 months. So we're really, really excited about that. And, you know, we have NWTC that's pledged in-kind time as well. And the sisters. The sisters were a supporter also, and they also contributed monetarily into that match. So we're going to be holding a press conference this Friday, which is Earth Day. You are all invited. There'll be more details coming on where that's going to happen. Let me just see if I can find it in my email, because this is all just happening this afternoon.
Looks like Fire Station 5 at
Yes.
10 a.m.
10 a.m. Fire Station 5, which is on Finger Road across from the East Town Mall. So you're all invited. If you can be there, that would be great. What else? No Mo May. Site is open. It was actually open last week. We opened it just after the INS meeting. So we've had some registrations trickling in. But after last night's council meeting and then the social media posts that went out today, just today alone, we received 120 registrations. So that's exciting. Once you register online, you can pick up your sign at the East or West Side Garage or at City Hall. And the GI code amendments for the landscaping standards will be going to the Plan Commission on May 9th. So originally we were going to be presenting those next week, but we need to put in a 2-week public notice. So that pushed it back to the next round of committee meetings. So the GI code amendments will be May 9th for all of the different landscaping standard changes that are being proposed for Chapter 44. And then the GI code amendments that are being proposed for the stormwater ordinance will be, I'm looking at my calendar, May 11th at the INS committee. So we encourage your attendance at those committee meetings, and members of the public also to come out and listen and learn and and speak if you wish.
Awesome. Any
Chair, I had a
questions?
question. I had a question. Oh, I'm sorry. I had a question for Melissa. She
Mhm.
does. Melissa, for that grant that you were just talking about, and you mentioned that there's some monies from the water utility and also just refresh my memory. Was that approved already, council-wise, or is there anything that we gotta?
No, it's going to go through the same process that we're going through for this green infrastructure. So it needs to go through the grant acceptance protocol. So I'll be putting that paperwork together and submitting it to the finance department, hopefully before the end of the week. And we do need a grant contract and everything. So there's still some, we were told we could talk about it publicly, but there's still some things that need to happen from the PSC before. But so to answer your question in a very long-winded way, Mark, that needs to go through the acceptance procedure as well.
And what was the amount that the city was up for that we had to look at?
$40,000 or $56,000, but that's city, water utility, and Green Bay Metro, which all have independent budgets. So,
Right. Right.
and I'll have a full
Okay.
breakdown of that in the grant
All right.
acceptance paperwork
All right. That's
for
great.
the
Thank you.
finance. Mhm.
Okay.
It will probably go through the finance committee, Mark,
All right.
because this is multiple, this is
Sure.
citywide departments. So it'll probably go through finance committee.
Okay. All right.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Awesome. Other questions for Melissa?
Melissa, could you just give us a quick rundown of what the OEI grant will get kind of at the end of the process? Are we looking at getting kind of a big document to
There'll be a document, it'll be a roadmap of recommendations and strategies for the various city departments and buildings, you know, and it'll also be looking at electrification for vehicles, especially for transit. Looking at that, it's going to be a variety of things, but it's also going to involve a lot of some community outreach and input into that plan as well, since it is community-wide. It's not just addressing city operations. We've done a lot already to document our energy usage with our city buildings and facilities and in our fleet. So now we're looking a little bit more broadly. It'll have recommendations for commercial and industrial businesses, so the different sectors of energy users. It'll have recommendations for residential as well. But you know, specifically for the city, we will have some specific recommendations and actions, and it will also have some recommendations as we move through this on policy recommendations as well.
Well, thank you.
Other questions? All right, that's some incredible news for Earth Week. Thanks for all your work on that. If there are no other questions, we'll just go to work group updates. And then after that, we'll have just member updates. But do we have any work group updates specifically? All right, hearing none. On to just general member updates, announcements from folks. Mark Walter.
If you in our work plan that we had put together a goal to look at food waste reduction over time. I wanted to share with you the fact that I was, if you had seen Charlie Frisk at the meeting last night, he has been participating with a high school program called an Envirothon for the last several decades, I guess. He contacted me earlier or late last year because the scenario that they were judging was waste to resource, and asked if I would help with developing a scenario. And so I created a scenario called Food Waste, a Challenge for Everyone. So we have 11 high school teams and 9 high school teams and 2 middle school teams that presented. Ned, I'm not supposed to know who they were. You know, they were school independent. Unless you tell me the name, I could probably tell you how they scored, but we actually have a jump now on developing. The scenario was to develop a food waste program for a small community, medium-sized community, and look at the options for how you would do this. They got really creative, some really great ideas out of that. So, you know, I had an ulterior motive when I did this, was to get a bunch of high school students to do a whole bunch of research on programs and so forth. So if any of you want to take a look, I think tomorrow is the final judging, right, Ned? You guys up over at Roshold?
I think there's something going on Friday.
Oh, tomorrow's Thursday. Yeah, Friday over in Roshold in central part of the state. That's where the actual competition judging, finalized judging is going to be. But if you go to Wisconsin Envirothon and look at current issue, you can see what they've done. I don't know if whether they post the videos or anything else. I don't know within the rules of that program how it exactly works, but I have a Google Drive with all the presentations on it. If anyone on the committee would like to see some of the presentations, certainly you can contact me, and I hopefully can share some of that information with you. But anyway, it's a great way of getting some research done and some really innovative younger folks looking at some of the future possibilities. So anyway, we're moving forward on our independently. This program is moving forward.
Sure.
Awesome.
I could ask Mark.
Oh,
could
yeah.
I ask Mark? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Mark. Last night, well, you did talk about the food waste and such, and yeah, I'm just looking at it from a city perspective. I know you work for the county, but yet we're part of that. So I'm very interested in that as well. So if there's some directives or some things that we can take from this research and move forward with that, and on a citywide level, I'd be interested in looking at that.
Yeah, there's a lot to be done,
right,
to say the least. And
okay.
Until end of May, I'm committed on grant writing for right now, but then I'll start devoting a lot more to this kind of effort as well, because it's too important not to do something in our area, at least in my view.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Marks. Corey.
It was a different topic, so assuming everybody's been asking questions and things for Mark's topic, which sounds really cool. I just wanted to update you all on, we had talked about putting together a list of material costs if we wanted to promote the commission at various events, and so I did that. And I would say in total, if we're looking at purchasing everything, well, I'll just kind of read through the list. If we wanted a stamp with our logo on it, a retractable banner, which you see people using at events now. If we did 500 postcard handouts, we could also do like 200 native seed packs with logos on, 300 custom pens. So it's kind of a matter of what types of things do we want to hand out. You know, could reduce the cost, increase it. If we want to hand anything out, maybe just take a picture of our QR code. And then registration for events can be like up to $100. So I think $300 for 3 events. A pop-up canopy, a 6-foot folding table, if we would need to provide something like that at some of these events, I'm not sure. And then for 2 folding chairs, it's all about $1,500. And I know Alder Scannell thought that maybe there was some funding in the city budget we could look for to fund these materials. So I'm not quite sure how that would happen. But that's the approximate cost. And like I said, we could obviously reduce it if needed to fit within a budget. So not sure what to take this from here.
Melissa or Alder Stoyer, do you have any
Um,
ideas on next steps?
I would say,
Yeah, oh, go ahead.
I would say my recommendation, Corey, would be to, type that up so that we have it, in like a memo format from you. And then, I could give it to my director and ask his opinion on, if that would be suitable for a city, like which city budget could potentially help fund that. That's where that's, I think, our starting point, but Alder Sawyer, I'll defer to you.
No, I agree. I think, Corey, if you can put something together, some figures, maybe there's a couple scenarios. But yeah, like I said, most of the time it has to go to a committee. We look at it, vote on it, goes to council, it's right. But I mean, that something like that could, I'm wondering if that would go, it could go through parks in a way. I don't know, finance, it could go through INS. I'm not really quite sure where that would go yet. I'd have to look at that. But I think it could be done. So if you have questions, Corey, you could get a hold of me and I'll try to navigate that with you.
Okay.
Cool. Mark Walter.
Yeah, my only comment, Corey, because of the field I am in with recycling and everything else, and having gone to a lot of conferences, as we all have, I'm sure, when you look at handouts, when you look at material that's there, keep an eye on what can and cannot be recycled or reused or repurposed at the end of the day. We just got a whole bunch of QR code stickers printed up for the Tri-County for our waste wizard, and they're printed on recycled material, printed with soy ink. Even though they're stickers, they actually are recyclable. So we took a look at all that when we were actually doing taking a look at all the options we have for different materials, and that would just be my one comment on, as you go through those lists of things, that you don't want stuff that you're handing out that's going to contribute to the waste rather than minimizing it.
That's a great point. And maybe we hand out garbage bags or something. I don't know.
As long as they're not plastic. Yeah. Yep. As
Whatever.
long as they're
Yeah.
not plastic.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Corey. I really like the idea of handing out native plant seeds too. I feel like that's very on brand. And then one thing that you said that that got me thinking, I don't know if we have like a distinct Sustainability Commission logo. I think I'd be interested in seeing if there was like a local graphic designer, and maybe it's part of this budget proposal that could design kind of a distinct logo for us to kind of stick. So just food for thought, I guess.
I know the city is eventually looking at rebranding possibly. So, that's in a whole nother area. But I think normally the city would cover all the different commissions and that. But, I think with this commission, it's a unique, it's unique. And I haven't really ever seen any other logos on other commissions or committees, but, that we could look into that as well. I'll peek into that.
Yeah, INS doesn't really inspire a logo, I don't think.
No. I don't take it personal. I don't take that personal. That's fine.
I think I really agree with Mark's comments 100% when I try to do stuff like that too, just in general, like the printing of stuff for sure. But then also just the logo, I think that's a great idea. And I would, if the city's going through a rebranding potentially though, I would not do it now. I would wait till that happens because that would change potentially what a logo would look like. So, and it could turn out better.
Yeah, or see if there's some way of integrating branding or a logo, some kind of logo design with the rebranding of the city so that we're consistent on.
Yeah, I think that would be really important. in general to be great with.
And we mentioned possibly doing something as soon as June and Aldo Leopold Legacy Day. I mentioned that I think the last meeting we talked about where could we have events, or where could we have a table. And the logo thing definitely popped up as soon as Corey was talking about having a banner, and I think it would be really cool. You know, if it turns out there is no money for a graphic designer, another route could be pitching it to the schools, and you know, would we want to have a design contest, something like that for kids? Certainly, I want to pay people for their work, but if it turns out we have no money to pay people, then that could be another route that we could go. And again, we do have that event coming up in a little over a month. If we did want to put anything together, have a table there, that might be a good place to do it. So, just a thought.
Melissa?
Yeah, I just would like to offer a couple of comments on that. You know, to my knowledge, there's no other city committee or commission that has a logo right now. So I would just kind of keep that in mind as far as the ask and, you know, some of the money that might be involved with that. I would also say that, you know, we do, as a city, we do have outreach. We do have some outreach materials to use, like we're going to the farmers market. The city has, you know, they've done that before where they've set up a table. So there might be some things we can borrow in the meantime. I don't think we need to rush anything just because there's an event coming up in 1 month. You know, and if we want to borrow a table, you know, the tablecloth that's branded with the city of Green Bay, and the city of Green Bay has branding standards. So that's something to keep in mind. You know, if we did a contest and it would include the logo, it would need to adhere to branding standards as well.
Sounds good. Corey?
Yeah, I agree with Melissa. I'm not aware of any committees or commissions, you know, that have a logo. But other than I do know we've created a new logo for the Green Bay Conservation Corps, which is not necessarily a direct tie-in to the City of Green Bay logo, which we also use in our advertising for the AmeriCorps. So I guess that's an example where we are using it within the city for kind of a subgroup, I guess you could call it, you know, of advertising for that program. So.
Yeah, I think you'd find a lot of examples of other cities, whether it's their sustainability office or whatnot. They have their own branding for the eco kind of stuff.
Awesome. Well, definitely sounds like we have some cool stuff to look into, and just a quick Google search and a hunch that the Arts Commission might have a logo confirms that they in fact do. So it wouldn't be a precedent changing thing if we did that, but want to be mindful of any city style guides and rebranding process that we might go through that would make our efforts moot. But thank you, Corey, for bringing that forward. Some exciting developments, and we'll stay tuned for more. Any other thoughts on that? All right. Any other updates, Julia?
Yeah, I was just gonna. This just recently happened. It took a while, but I was just going to mention that, give an update on the flood resiliency planning efforts. And the city staff participated in kind of a community questionnaire assessment, resiliency assessment over 4 months from the fall to January. And the East River project team helped facilitate that process. And we just this week were able to finally package all all the feedback and input and all the things that from those workshops, and wrote up a little memo with kind of the results of that work and we handed it over to Melissa finally. So there is a ton of information in what we handed over to her and some really good stuff. And that is just from the staff level perspective. So there's a lot more work to do, but it's a really good starting place.
Is that something that could be shared fairly soon? As far as, for me on council, I would really, a lot of us alders have gone down to flood areas that aren't even in our district and looked at things. So that was a real tough issue over the last few years. So any kind of information or research that's been done that way I think would be beneficial, for me as well and other council members. So just a point.
Melissa, did you want to speak to that? Because I
guess what I would say, because I was so involved with that whole process, Alder Steuer, is, now that I have the full report that Julia and the rest of the team were working on, after I review it, I will probably more than likely do a presentation at an upcoming Sustainability Commission meeting to share the results with this group. And then our report then would go to the council in our normal monthly report. So we could do it that way. That's probably the original, the initial thought I had on that.
That's fine. That would be fine.
Okay.
All right. Any other updates for the good of the group? All right, hearing none, I hope everybody has a happy Earth Day, and we'll see you all next month. Thanks, everybody. Oh, Melissa, do you have something? You're on mute.
I said, or at the press conference this Friday at 10.
Yeah.
Do you need to make a motion to adjourn?
Oh, yes. Yeah, motion to adjourn.
Well,
Julia, is that a motion?
I guess, yes.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
By Ned. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Hey Seth, are you going to
Earth Week.
consider in person in the future? Remember we talked about that last night?
Yeah, is that what are the rules on that? Is that the chair's discretion?
Yes, yep. That's what I've heard.
Meeting is adjourned, so I don't think we can discuss this right now without.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it and let people know though.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.
Melissa,